The message lit up my phone screen, while the photographer was still lining up the bridal party. "You're fired. Effective immediately. Don't bother coming back for your things." My new sister-in-law, Priya Okonkwo Reyes, had sent it 30 seconds after hugging me at the altar, her smile never once slipping while she typed it under the table. I didn't gasp. I didn't show my new husband the screen. I slid the phone back into my clutch and kept dancing, because I already knew something Priya didn't. The merger she'd just used my termination to celebrate couldn't legally close without my signature on file. My name is Odalis Ferreira. I'm 33, and until that Saturday afternoon, I was Director of Compliance Architecture at Whitcomb Reyes Capital, a mid-size investment firm in Charlotte. I have a background in financial systems auditing, the unglamorous discipline of making sure every fund transfer, every client disclosure, every regulatory filing lines up exactly the way it's supposed to. 3 years ago, I designed the firm's entire compliance tracking system from scratch, the one piece of internal architecture that verified every trade against SEC disclosure requirements before it went out the door. I married Desmond Reyes that Saturday, a soft-spoken marine biologist who had nothing to do with his family's finance business, which is exactly why I trusted him enough to marry into a family I barely understood. Priya was Desmond's older sister, and the firm's newly appointed COO, a role she'd been maneuvering toward for 2 years by quietly undermining anyone who might slow her down. She'd inherited her father's title, but none of his caution. 3 months before the wedding, she began routing compliance sign-offs around me, telling clients directly that approvals were handled internally now. When I asked why my system had stopped flagging certain trades, she told me I was being paranoid, that I'd always been a little too attached to your little program. I let it go, because arguing with my fiancé's sister 2 months before the wedding felt like the wrong hill to die on. Why did the firm's outside auditor call my direct line twice that same week, asking pointed questions about a fund I'd never personally reviewed? I didn't confront her yet. I quietly kept my own mirrored logs of every trade my system had processed going back 3 years, a habit built into the software itself that Priya didn't know existed, because I'd built it to survive exactly this kind of politics. 2 weeks before the wedding, I noticed a pattern. 4 large client accounts had been moved into a new fund structure called Meridian Bridge Partners, a name that appeared nowhere in our public disclosures, its documentation routed entirely through Priya's private assistant instead of compliance. I ran the numbers quietly one evening, after everyone else had left the office. Meridian Bridge wasn't a legitimate internal fund at all. It was a shell vehicle registered to an address matching Priya's own condominium, structured to skim a advisory fee off client returns before the money ever reached its stated destination, a fee that had never been disclosed to a single client and never once appeared in our SEC filings. Over 8 months, it had quietly diverted nearly $2 million in undisclosed fees from clients who trusted the Reyes name. I didn't tell Desmond. I didn't tell anyone at the firm. I copied the mirrored logs, the fund documentation, and the wire records onto an encrypted drive and sent everything to a securities attorney named Marguerite Okafor, someone with zero connection to the firm, 3 days before my own wedding. I let Priya believe the system was exactly as broken as she'd told everyone it was. I smiled through the rehearsal dinner. I let her walk me down the aisle rehearsal, like nothing was wrong, because anger would only warn her. Evidence would end her. The firing text on my wedding day wasn't cruelty for its own sake, I'd later learn. It was timing. Priya needed me gone before Monday, when Meridian Bridge was scheduled to absorb its largest transfer yet, a client rollover worth $400,000. With me terminated, she assumed the compliance system would go dark with no one left who understood its verification logic. What she didn't know was that my system required a standing digital signature, renewed weekly, from an active director of compliance to authorize any transfer above a certain threshold. Firing me hadn't disabled the system, it had frozen it. By the time our first dance ended, 108 missed calls had stacked up on my phone, the trading desk, IT, and 17 calls from Gregory Reyes, the firm's founder, and Priya and Desmond's father, who I'd always liked and who clearly had no idea what his daughter had just done. I let every call go to voicemail. Desmond found me checking the screen in the church vestibule and asked if I was all right. I told him the truth, quietly, standing in my wedding dress. His sister had just tried to fire me to push through a fund that didn't officially exist. He didn't ask me to explain twice. He asked what I needed him to do, and I told him, for now, nothing. Tonight was still ours. Monday morning, Marguerite filed the documentation with the SEC's whistleblower office on my behalf, alongside a formal notice to the firm's board that the terminated director of compliance held records materially relevant to an active fund irregularity. Gregory received the notice before Priya did. He called me directly, his voice tight in a way I'd never heard from him. Odalise, tell me this isn't what it looks like. I told him it was exactly what it looked like, and that I had 3 years of mirrored logs proving it. Priya tried to control the story first, telling her father over speakerphone, with me still on the line, that I'd manufactured records out of spite for being let go. I didn't raise my voice. I asked Gregory to check one thing himself: the registered address on Meridian Bridge Partners formation documents, filed 8 months earlier with the state, matched his daughter's condo unit exactly. The silence on that call lasted longer than any silence I'd ever heard from a Reyes. The SEC opened a formal inquiry within 2 weeks, and the $400,000 rollover was frozen before it ever reached Meridian Bridge. Priya was suspended from her role pending investigation, and Gregory, rather than protecting her the way I'd feared he might, brought in an independent forensic accountant to trace every dollar the shell fund had touched. She was ultimately barred from serving as an officer of any registered investment advisor for 5 years, and ordered to repay the diverted fees in full, a settlement that avoided criminal referral only because she cooperated fully once the numbers were no longer deniable. Desmond never once asked me to go easier on his sister. At Thanksgiving that year, Priya wasn't at the table, and nobody pretended that was an accident. Gregory asked me, quietly, over coffee, if I'd consider staying on, to help rebuild the compliance function from the ground up, with full authority this time. No routing around me. No more quiet exclusions. I said I'd think about it, and I meant it, because for the first time in 3 years, the offer came with nothing I had to trade away to accept it. I think about that message sometimes, the one meant to erase 2 years of work, in a single sentence, on the happiest day of my life. If you'd been standing in that dress with that phone buzzing in your hand, would you have shown your new husband the message right then, or waited, the way I did, until the proof could speak for itself?